2022 FIDE Chess Olympiad, India versus USA. What a match with Caruana versus Gukesh on board 1. Team USA expects Caruana to win this game and lead the team to victory. Can Gukesh survive? Let's find out. Caruana quickly starts with the pawn move to e4, but then Gukesh takes a lot of time. Thoda seat adjust, thoda jacket adjust, and finally he's ready to play his first move. Caruana looks to the left, nervously waiting for Gukesh to play his hand. And then finally Gukesh goes for the Sicilian defense. We are in for a fight. Caruana develops with knight to f3 and Gukesh puts out his knight to c6. Caruana goes for his favorite opening, the Rossolimo. After g6 we have castles, bishop g7, and then he takes on c6, spoils Gukesh's pawn structure, and Gukesh takes back. Gukesh is looking at Nihal's game as Caruana plays rook to e1. Gukesh develops his queen to c7, and after a couple of developing moves h3, d6, Caruana launches with the move e5 before Gukesh can castle. He takes away the f6 square from his knight as well. So Gukesh has no choice but to spoil his pawn structure, and now Caruana plays pawn to d3. He has basically broken his pawn structure completely. Gukesh knows if Caruana consolidates at some point with b3, then this pawn will be weak, so he sacrifices it back, and Caruana does not take. He develops another piece with knight to c3. Gukesh munches on the pawn on d3 and Caruana grabs it back, and then the task is to develop the knight. Gukesh places it on h6. This is the funniest moment of this match. Both the players drinking water at the exact same time. This can't be a coincidence. Maybe some psychological games at play. Caruana can now grab the pawn on e5 because if Gukesh takes this, then he can take this and Gukesh cannot castle anymore. After knight to f5, bishop f4, the queen was attacked, so it moves to b7, not a comfortable square. So knight a4, the knight can now again attack the queen from c5. f6, the knight has to come back, and now finally Gukesh castles, but his king is clearly weak. And now comes pawn to d4 and Gukesh cannot play e5 anymore, so he resorts to g5, attacking the bishop. Caruana has no choice. He has to move the bishop somewhere, chooses the h2 square close to his king. Gukesh is in an attacking mood. He plays the pawn to h5 and the stakes have doubled. Caruana plays rook to e4, controlling all these pawn advances, and now Gukesh quietly brings the queen, keeping an eye on the king side. Caruana develops his queen, so he wants to bring the second rook into the game, and now Gukesh plays the rook to f7. It's more of a defensive and also an attacking move. The rook could later come to g7 and launch an attack. Caruana brings his last piece into the game, rook a e1, and then Gukesh quickly drops the bishop to f8, clearing the g7 square for his rook. Caruana also shifts his queen to e2, keeping an eye on that weak h5 pawn, and now Gukesh plays queen to d5, so he gets out of any knight c5 tactics, and because the knight is not doing much, Caruana brings it back to c3 and the queen has to go back. So Gukesh basically is offering a repetition. So if Caruana plays knight a4, he would play queen d5 and the game would end in a draw. But Caruana had other plans. Caruana is the stronger player here. Not to forget, Gukesh is rated just 2,684 in this event. Well, who knew he will be the next world championship challenger at this point? So Caruana plays queen to c4, pins the rook here, queen to b7, b4, e6, rook b1. Caruana playing on the king side as well as the queen side and the center, dominating the game. Queen to d7, rook e1, queen b7, rook b1. They repeat the moves a couple of times, and after queen d7, Caruana plays on again with a3, and finally Gukesh challenges Caruana here with the pawn move to a5. This is where Gukesh starts taking control of the game. Caruana plays the knight out to a4. It's moved to that square for the second time in the game. The big threat is knight to b6, forking the queen and the rook. So the queen moves back to d8, controlling this square. And now he plays b takes e5, another slight mistake, because now you can see both the pawns a3 and a5 incredibly weak. Gukesh captures one back for now, and now knight to c5 and finally queen d5. Clearly white cannot exchange queens because the queen side pawns will fall and then black will have the edge. So he drops the queen back to e2, but Gukesh simply munches the pawn on a3. He is in absolute control here. Caruana is now in defensive mode, brings the rook to d1 to defend the weakness on d4. Gukesh now transfers the other rook to a7 and Caruana knows the queen side is busted. So he launches with g4, his last desperate attempt. Gukesh takes and now attacks the g4 again. So he shows that even the king side is actually weak for Caruana. Caruana plays bishop g3, basically a nothing move, and then Gukesh plays the pawn out to e5, breaking the center when his pieces are ready. Caruana can't grab this pawn because the knight would be loose, so he actually decides to sacrifice a piece with knight takes e5 here. Gukesh grabs the piece and Caruana takes with the rook, attacking Gukesh's queen. And what would you and I do here? This is a critical moment. If you decide to move the queen back somewhere, let's say you go queen to d8, even defending this pawn, now comes knight to e6, bishop takes rook rook takes, and the rook has entered the fray, and now the black king can be attacked. The game is definitely on fire right now. But Gukesh finds the only move in the position to destroy any chance, any hopes Caruana may have had, and he finds the best move in this position, and he plays bishop takes g4, counter-attacking Caruana's queen, and Caruana is shocked. Gukesh calmly drinks water, similar to how we see Prag do it nowadays, and he is in absolute control. Caruana sidesteps with the queen, points towards the g5 square, but now Gukesh brings his queen in for the final assault. Gukesh knows the game is in the bag as Caruana takes on g5 with check. Gukesh calmly brings the rook back to g7 to defend it, and Caruana, still trying desperately, plays rook to e1 to bring one more piece into the attack, but it's too little too late as Gukesh plays bishop h3, threatening checkmate in 1. Caruana plays bishop d6, hoping for some tactics and allowing the rook to defend the g2 square, but now the bishop on d6 is simply hanging. Gukesh takes the free piece, Caruana takes on g7 with check, Gukesh takes with the king, and now queen to g5, the last desperate try from Fabiano Caruana. While Gukesh's king has a very safe spot on h7, and that's where it heads off, and after king h7, knight to e4 is Caruana's last try. He's threatening knight to f6, and this is the final move of the game. Gukesh played something beautiful here, and after it, Caruana resigned. If you want to pause the video, this is the moment. Can you find what the future world championship challenger actually played? He sacrificed his queen because his bishop pair is doing a fabulous job. So the move is queen takes e4, simply grabbing the knight up for sale, and once the rook takes the queen, rook takes e4, there is rook to a1, and it's actually checkmate. The bishop on d6 controlling the important square. You can bring the rook, but rook takes e1, it is checkmate, and that's why Caruana resigned after queen takes e4, and Gukesh defeated one of the strongest players in the world in the Olympiad. And as usual, Gukesh did not leave the board until he had adjusted every single piece. The respect he has for the game is admirable. Gukesh had a streak of 8 out of 8 wins in the last Olympiad, and he was rated 2684 back then. What can we expect in this Olympiad? Let us know in the comments.